This is the Thriving Dentist Show with Gary Takis, where we help you develop your ideal dental practice, one that provides personal, professional, and financial satisfaction.
Welcome to another episode of the Thriving Dentist Show. I'm Gary Takis, your podcast co-host. We have a great episode for you today, one I think you're going to love. It's titled Cross-Training Team Members in a Thriving Practice. I'm going to share some great information with you that I think you can apply right away in your practice to strengthen your office. Hey, before I do that, a couple announcements to make. First announcement is coming up about 3 weeks after we publish this episode is our next Thriving Dentist Masterclass. This is a brand new masterclass we have never given before, first time. It's titled Keys to Creating a Practice That Provides a Work-Life Balance. Well, if you're like many dentists who feel like you don't have an effective work-life balance, this masterclass is for you. When I talk to dentists and ask them how they feel about their work-life balance, most of them say, well, Gary, the work part, I've got covered. I'm working my tail off. The life part, not so much. Well, one of the things I'm passionate about is helping dentists achieve an effective work-life balance. Because if you have success in your practice, financial success, say, but it comes at the expense of your relationship with your spouse, relationship with your children, relationship with your friends. If it comes at the expense of time for health and fitness and wellness, many dentists have told me, Gary, I'd like to work out more, but I just don't have time. Or if it comes at the expense of time to spend in your hobbies and interests outside of dentistry, then I'm going to argue that that's not success at all. And I will tell you that it is not mutually exclusive. It is not mutually exclusive to have a thriving practice and also have an effective work-life balance. Those can be achieved together. If you're interested in that, come join us. It is September 26th, 7 to 10 p.m., 3 hours. You get 3 hours of CE credits, one evening. It's done in a live stream format. If you'd like to register, go to thrivingdentist.com/masterclass. Just a note, our masterclasses do historically sell out. We expect this one to sell out. And even though it's a virtual class, it's done virtually, we do limit attendance because I run it more like a workshop than a lecture. So if you'd like to grab your seat, do it now. thrivingdentist.com/masterclass. Come join us. The second announcement I have is we have a new top clinical tips contributor. This is Dr. Dennis Hartlieb. He is the founder of Dental Online Training, wonderful resource for dentists with all kinds of online clinical training. And he's going to talk to you today about resin bonded bridges. I think you're going to enjoy what Dr. Dennis Hartlieb has to say. With no further ado, here's Dr. Dennis Hartlieb on resin bonded bridges.
Hello, I'm Dr. Dennis Hartlieb, dentist and founder of Dental Online Training, the #1 resource for dentists for continuing education for virtual hands-on programs, online learning with hands-on programs. And today I'm here to talk to you about resin bonded bridges. What are resin bonded bridges? Well, think about the Maryland bridges that were so popular in the 1980s up until really the most recent couple of decades. These Maryland bridges were meant for minimal tooth replacements, 1 to 2 teeth. Now today, with the materials that we have available with zirconia and lithium disilicate, i.e. EMAX, we can create the same tooth replacements only with a more aesthetic material. So what do you need to know if you want to do any sort of resin bonded bridge? What do you need to know in today's world, the materials that we have with both the materials that we're using and the cementations that we have? To begin with, what I think we do need to talk about is we're learning that we have to be very careful in today's world when we're placing dental implants in the aesthetic zone. As many of us have observed, with patients that are still growing, and even with mature adult patients, we can see when we place implants in the aesthetic zone that there can be facial growth and the implants are sort of stuck in time. So the teeth are erupting, the maxilla is erupting downward and forward, but the implants are frozen in time. I just had a case in recently on a 20-some-year-old woman that we placed implants on about 4 years ago. And we had placed the implants, the gingival margins were all lined up with the restorative on the lateral, the congenitally missing lateral incisors. Everything looked great. 4 years later, we're starting to see that the gingival margins of the implants are actually apical to the gingival margins of the neighboring teeth. So we're seeing facial growth downward and forward where the implants are staying behind. This is a big issue in dentistry that we have to be concerned about. So in today's world, I'm looking at resin bonded bridges as an alternative whenever I can for a missing anterior tooth instead of placing a dental implant, especially on a young adult. So what do we need to know now that we understand that there's going to be these patients that we have to avoid placing dental implants? Let's talk about these resin bonded bridges. As I said, there's really two options we have in today's dental marketplace. We have zirconia, which gives us great strength, and it's a proven material that we've been using for many years. As we know, though, one of the challenges with zirconia is the aesthetics. It can be more challenging to get high aesthetics with the strongest zirconias available. So zirconia comes in three different, essentially, strengths. We have our 3Y zirconias, which are our strongest, but they're also our most opaque and the least aesthetic materials. We have the 4Y materials, which are more aesthetic, but we lose a lot of the strength and we lose a lot of the healing of zirconia. The advantage of zirconia is that when you get a crack started in a zirconia, there's actually a healing that seals up that crack so it can't propagate through the material. When you go into the 4Y and especially the 5Y zirconias, you really lose that healing ability of the zirconia. So if you start getting a crack, it's more likely to continue on and cause failure of the restoration. So 3Y give us our best strength, but they also give us our biggest challenges for the aesthetics. Alternatively, we have what's called lithium disilicate, which is most commonly known as EMAX. But there are other lithium disilicate materials on the markets, including LICI from GC. So with lithium disilicate, it's our more aesthetic material, easy to gain aesthetics with lithium disilicate. But the problem is it doesn't have the same strength as we get with zirconia. So why does that matter? It matters because when we go to do our preparations on the teeth and we're looking at the size of the restorations for these bridges, what the critical portion of these is what we call the connector. And the connector is the area between the abutment and the pontic, the missing tooth, right? So that connector, if you're doing a 3Y zirconia, your connector can be about 7 to 9 millimeters squared in dimension, meaning it doesn't have to be very tall and it doesn't have to be very bulky, which, as we know, in the anterior part of the mouth, this can be a real challenge if we have to have really bulky connectors. They can start to look unaesthetic and not natural. Whereas if you go into the 4Y or 5Y zirconias, or if you go into lithium disilicate, now your connectors need to be about 12 millimeters squared, meaning they got to be about 4 millimeters tall or taller and about 4 millimeters wide from palatal to facial. That's really thick, and that's hard to get that much thickness on many teeth. So that's how we sort of determine in our practice, are we going to be using lithium disilicate, where it's easier to get higher aesthetics, or if we're going to use zirconia, is really about how big is that connector, how big of a connector can we make for that individual. And it really has to do about the tooth size that the patient has, and has to do with their occlusion. So there's many factors that will center on that decision factor. Now, one of the big things that we need to know about these resin bonded bridges is that in the old days when we were doing Maryland bridges, those were customarily two-winged, where we'd have metal wings that would go onto abutments on either side of the missing tooth, and then we would have the pontic in the middle. Well, Matthias Kern in Germany, he learned many years ago, and he's done much research on this, that the failure rate of a two-wing bonded bridge is much higher than a single-wing bonded bridge, whether it be metal or in a ceramic.
Welcome back to the Thriving Dentist Coaching and Action segment. This is Naren, your co-host. Dr. Hartley, thank you very much for that wonderful tip, clinical tip, resin bonded bridges. We'll be putting a link. So if anyone wants to watch the video, you can go to thrivingdentist.com, find this podcast, in show notes, you will actually see Dr. Hartlieb explain this. So appreciate that, Dr. Hartlieb. Hope to see you again. Thank you for your wonderful tip. Gary, I'm really excited about today's topic, cross-training team members in a thriving practice. I'm excited for it for two reasons. One is, I'm a huge fan of learning about human motivation. And one of the ways to motivate people is to give them variety. In other words, if somebody's doing the same thing the rest of their lives, it doesn't inspire them. But if they're doing different things on different days, and they can jump in, and it makes them feel more useful and makes them, be a more integral part of the team. But also, it's fun to mix things up, right? I mean, Gary, like if you're doing the same thing, imagine in your job, you'll get bored. We all get excitement from variety. And obviously, from a practice owner, I run a business myself, there are times when in some places you need more people than in other places. So imagine not being able to meet that demand. Let's say there's too many people at the check-in counter and you don't have enough people at the check-in counter, What if somebody can, come in and help out from the back of the office? So Gary, I'm really looking forward to it. You have tons of experience, 43 plus years of experience. So cross-training is something you preach, something you really believe in your heart. So I'm really looking forward to some practical tips and strategies that perhaps our listeners can take away and do something with next day.
Yeah, I think you'll find this episode very useful. Most of you know that I've made it my life's work to study world-class practices. And any way you look at it, you would identify those practices as a fantastic practice, as a thriving practice. What is a thriving practice? Well, a thriving practice is one that provides personal, professional, and financial satisfaction. Personal satisfaction means you're taking care of patients you enjoy, surrounded by a team you love. Professional satisfaction means you're doing more of the kind of dentistry you like to do, whatever that is. Dentistry comes in many flavors. You don't have to like everything. Pick the stuff you like and do more of that, whatever that is. And financial satisfaction is a little more self-explanatory. That means that you're being rewarded handsomely financially for your care, skill, and judgment. And one of the things I've noticed in world-class thriving practices is there's a great deal of cross-training that's gone on in the practice. And many times their team members are very thoroughly cross-trained to fill in when needed outside of their normal job. Now, Naren, in a way, this goes against kind of workplace trends. There's a trend today that everything is specialized. Everything is micro-specialized, right?
Yes.
In business, that I'm not talking about specialists like in dentistry. I mean, in terms of tasks and chores and activities. And there's a trend toward a more narrow job description instead of a very broad job description. Naren, can I share with you that if I was asked to write a job description for any team member in an office, can I share how I'd like to write that job description?
Go for it.
Whatever it takes to get the job done is a job description. Now, that isn't how I write a job description, but that's what I'd like to write. Because, in dentistry, about the only thing that we know for certain is change today. Something's going to change, in the schedule. Something's going to happen. And every day, the day unfolds with twists and turns and roadblocks and hurdles and complications. I think that's a fair statement, isn't it, Naren? It's part of what makes dentistry really interesting, but it can also present challenges from a management position, because I could think of departments in the practice being shorthanded. For example, I can imagine that on a given point during the day, the office may need another assistant or another person functioning as an assistant.
Right.
Or let's turn the tide the other way. I can imagine that the office might need another person up front in the administrative side of the practice to help things run smoothly. And without cross-training, that isn't going to happen. And I personally object to a mindset that we do encounter these days where, oh, that's not my job. That's not my job. Whatever, oh, that's not my job. I object to that. Because like I said, if I could write a job description, my job description would be whatever it takes to get the job done. And I think that's what allows us to make the most of every day by being able to be nimble and move people. It's almost like you're playing chess and you can move the pieces of the chessboard around. So let me just say that I am a huge advocate of cross-training. Now, I want to get a little bit more specific about it. I think there's many ways we can cross-train, but let me get very specific about it. Let me share with you 5 specific things that you could train your dental assistants to do if they were needed at the front desk. If they were needed. 5. Now, they're not, I want to be clear, we are not training them to the same degree of competency as our admin team members. That's not the expectation. Not the expectation at all. But I want to share with them 5 things that we've proven in my coaching work, proven at Life Smiles, but we also proven in our coaching work, that we can train assistants to do very effectively up front when needed. Let me walk through those. I'll number them 1 through 5. Number 1, check patients in. Check patients in. Every practice should have a check-in process when a patient shows up for their appointment. Number 2, check patients out. At the end of their appointment, we check them out. That's the second task that your assistants can be very effectively trained to do. Number 3 might be part of the checkout process, but I think of it as a little bit separate, but part of. Handle over-the-counter payment when checking out. So let's say there's an over-the-counter payment for today's hygiene appointment. Well, they should be able to handle that right at the front desk. Handle it seamlessly, smoothly, efficiently for the patient and the practice. Number 4, your dental assistant should be able to make financial arrangements for everyday general dentistry. So let me talk about that. So let's say the patient has gone through a hygiene appointment today, and doctor discovered there were some areas on the upper left that require fillings, and now the patient is going to be scheduling for those fillings. So everyday general dentistry. So your assistant, who's now covering at the front, as part of the checkout process, should be able to handle payment today for the hygiene appointment, but also schedule and make financial arrangements for those fillings on the upper left. That should be something well within, a dental assistant's capabilities, for sure. Now, notice, Naren, I'm not talking about high-value dentistry. I'm talking about everyday general dentistry here. I'm not talking about being able to make financial arrangements and scheduling for a full mouth reconstruction. I would say that's something that's more specialized and should be handled by our admin team members that are more well versed in that area. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then finally, number 5 is anyone that's covering at the front desk should be able to answer the phones regarding a potential new patient caller with the same conversion percentage that our rockstar admin team members exhibit. Remember we've done episodes on conversion percentage. Conversion percentage, doctor, is what percent of callers that are potential patients end up scheduling a new patient appointment. And the goal that we're looking for is 70% or above. 70% or above. It's not 100% because that's not realistic, but we want to get a score of 70% or above. Now, we should be able to train your admin team members to be able to do that, or your assistants to be able to do that at the same degree of success that your admin team members have. Now, they're not going to know that just out of the box. They're going to have some training to do that, because that way I'm not affecting my new patient flow, because I'm expecting the same degree of performance that my rockstar admin team members have. And with a little bit of training, they absolutely can achieve. Naren, you've seen that in our mutual clients. You've seen how we've been able to do that.
Yes.
Yeah. So there's 5 very specific things you could train an assistant to do and to cover up front when needed. And that door swings both ways, Naren. Our admin team members should be able to cover in the back, Life Smiles, we happen to have 2 admin team members that were former assistants. Now, it's kind of cool that they were former assistants because they have some education and training around that. But even if your admin team members weren't former assistants, there's some things they can do up front, or they can do in the back, in the admin side of your practice. For example, I believe every team member should be trained to be able to do sterilization of instruments in your practice. Every team member should be able to do it. Now it's going to take some training, and it has to be done to a high standard because we don't want any lapses when it comes to sterilization. But they should be able to handle sterilization of instruments in the back. They can function as an assistant, not necessarily with the same degree of skill that your really great assistants would do, but they should be able to function as an assistant in the back, handing instruments, or at the 12 o'clock position, doing data entry when needed. Another task that I think everybody in the practice should do is everybody should be able to take the 6 digital photos that we take for patient education. Those 6 digital photos. Now, typically, that would be more of a clinical team member role to take those photos.
Correct.
But if on a given day our assistants are occupied and we have a patient that we'd like to take those photos on, I don't want to miss the opportunity to take the photos, so we have no one to take the photos. Now, so that door swings both ways. Now, it's more limited in terms of hygiene. Hygienists can be cross-trained in other areas when needed. But of course, only a hygienist can actually provide the hygiene services, of course. However, one of the things we like to do is cross-train all of our team members to be able to do perio charting for the hygienist, to be able to do, again, with training, any of our team members can do perio charting. That way, we're always going to be able to get our correct perio charting requirements with the patient. And again, this helps us kind of identify the bottlenecks during the day and effectively work our way through the bottlenecks and end up having a more productive, more enjoyable day, better experience for the patient, less waiting, more timely, a better experience for the patient. There's all kinds of benefits to cross-training, not the least of which is I believe it creates a more engaged team member, team members, thriving team members appreciate learning new skills. They see it as more fulfilling. And as you mentioned in the opening, Naren, their days are more interesting because they're not painted into a narrow corner of this is the only thing they do. They end up having a much more varied and diverse work day, which for many people, that is more satisfying to them. It results in better retention, better long time, retaining team members, happier team members. You're engaging their mind, their spirit, and overall, it's a great benefit. Not the least of which is allows the practice to be more productive. For example, when I'm working with my clients to look for opportunities to add more same-day dentistry, the more cross-trained our team members are, the better results we get at being able to add in same-day dentistry. That makes perfect sense, doesn't it, Naren?
100%, Gary. I think one of the things I have learned watching you over the years is, I'll use your daughter, right, who works for Life Smiles, right? She can do lots of things. She works with us on marketing. She's an amazing patient advocate. She's a great leader.
Yeah, technically, Madi does 3 roles in the practice. Madi is my oldest daughter. She ran my consulting firm, just for our listeners' benefit. She ran my consulting firm for 15 years. She's ASU, Arizona State University graduate, dual degreed, very, very bright. I'm biased, but I think you'd find what I said to be true.
I agree.
She's Dr. Tim. So a number of years ago, she came to me and said, "Dad, I'm loving working in dentistry, but I think I'd like to work in an office." I'm like, "Well, we have one. How about ours?" So I hope you're going to say that. So she became Dr. Tim's scheduling coordinator. She became one of our new patient coordinators, one of 2, and she became our marketing coordinator. She's the one that interfaces with Equa, but she is an example of someone who's cross-trained. Now, let me get very specific. I'm glad you brought her up because Madi and Carly are our new patient coordinators, and we see 3 new patients a day per doc, 3 new patients a day. That represents 30 minutes per new patient of doctor time. So that represents an hour and a half of doctor time each day. But Madi and Carly are also our new patient coordinators. They do the entire first hour. They do the first 30 minutes of the new patient appointment by themselves. And in the first 30 minutes, they take the patient on a tour. They, secondly, they do a quick interview in the consult room. That's where we learn the patient's dental story. 7 questions. Then we take the 6 digital photos for patient education, and then she takes whatever records we're going to take. They might be bite wings, they might be full mouth series, they might be a digital panoramic X-ray, and there might be a CBCT. They take those, and then they're now going to meet the doctor, and they're going to be in the new patient treatment room, and Madi will stay in the room as the examining assistant. Now, she's not passing instruments like that kind of an assistant, but she's at the 12 o'clock position doing data entry as doctor is, calling out the existing condition of the patient's mouth. And the reason she stays in the room, Naren, is because she has the connection with the patient. She spent the first half hour there. She's connected to the patient. After that doctor part of the new patient appointment, she escorts the patient down the hall to the hygiene room, introduces the patient to the hygienist, and then she will end up finishing the appointment at the end to review financial arrangements and scheduling with that new patient. So that's kind of how that works. But remember that she's also Dr. Tim's scheduling coordinator. So 3 hours a day, she is engaged in patient-facing activity. She's not at the desk. And in order to not leave her team members overwhelmed, when she leaves the desk to be with a new patient, she goes to the back office and gets an extra assistant to cover her at the front desk and do those 5 tasks that I said an assistant should be able to do. Check people in, check them out, have a handle over the counter payment for today's patients, make financial arrangements for everyday general dentistry, and answer the phone for potential new patients. Because if she didn't have that person filling in the spot, the other 2 at the front desk would be overwhelmed based on the volume of activity that occurs. Naren, does that make sense?
That makes total sense. I know Marty, and she's full of life, and she's a mom. She has 2 kids. This is not just a job. She comes in and punches the clock. She enjoys it because she's doing a set of different roles, and she's changing people's lives. She's making a difference in the practice. She's so important for the doctor whose schedule she's responsible for. She has purpose. She has meaning. It's fun, right? A lot of people, I think, are not there just for a paycheck, not there, just for that. They want a reason to wake up in the morning and jump out of bed and do what they
I think Madi would honestly tell you that one of the things she loves about her job is she gets the opportunity to change people's lives every day.
Exactly.
She gets the opportunity to do that.
Right.
And I think she would accurately report that as true. Well, Naren, I took a look ahead at some of the questions that were submitted. We've got some great questions that allow us to kind of amplify this concept of cross-training. Let's hit pause here on the Coaching in Action segment, and let's continue with the Thriving Dentist Q&A segment.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Thriving Dentist Q&A segment. Hope you enjoyed the Coaching in Action segment as much as I did. Once again, it's Naren, your co-host. I have 4 questions for you, Gary. Let me start with the first one. Gary, as you are well aware of the employment landscape, it's really hard to get high-quality people and then retain them. Is it possible that cross-training may actually make team members see the role as difficult and perhaps even consider leaving?
Well, what a great question. And I get the question because let's face it, the employment landscape today is different than it's ever been in the past. Very, very, very different. You'd have to have your head in the sand to not realize it isn't different. It is a different environment today, no doubt. However, I actually think what happens when you cross-train is you make the job more exciting for them. You make it more engaging. I actually believe that it leads to better retention of team members because they don't feel bored. They don't feel like, they're just a meaningless spoke in the wheel. They feel their job has purpose. So actually, I think, although I understand your question, I can understand where someone will, wait, now I got to do all this stuff I've never had to do before. Could that push someone away? Well, I get it. And the answer is yes. It's possible that could happen. Yes, it's possible. But I'm going to politely suggest that might have been a good screening process because likely that person, isn't the best fit for you. And one thing, and I'm going to get on my soapbox here for just a second, Naren. I've heard in discussions among dentists that they're lowering their standards in terms of hiring today. I couldn't disagree with that more. I could not disagree with that more. No, it's not time to lower your standards. Keep looking till you find people that meet your standards. Keep looking. And it may mean looking outside of dentistry to find them. But right now, there is no doubt in my mind that's more important than ever to have a team that is fully engaged, that is fully involved. They're passionate. They have a mission. They have a purpose. It's more important than ever today. So don't settle. Don't settle. And man, I know that some of you have had open positions, and you're thinking, God, I just, if they have a pulse, I think I'll hire them. And that is a mistake today. That's a mistake. How many do you need? Even if it's a big practice, how many do you need? You don't need that many. Somewhere in your community, we will find those people. And here's another thing that's happening, Aaron. And there's a rather significant trend happening. People leaving their careers to do something different. People are leaving out of dissatisfaction. For example, many nurses are leaving nursing for many reasons. Nursing, often they work in shifts. Often they have odd hours, 24-hour shifts, and they have late night shifts. Well, dentistry doesn't have late night shifts. Secondly, a lot of nurses have been kind of pushed away from patient care, and now are pushing paper instead of taking care of patients. And they can make more money in dentistry as an assistant. And for a lot of reasons, I mean, you might want to hire a nurse, and the nurse might say, well, I don't have any specific dental experience. Naren, do you think an office could train someone that was trained as a nurse? Do you think we can train that person as a dental assistant?
Absolutely. I mean, they have so many years of experience in
patient care.
Patients, yeah.
Yeah, you bet. You bet. There's a trend among nurses of going back to school to become a hygienist. Now, of course, you can't just pivot from nursing to hygiene without the the degree, but they could go directly from nursing to assisting.
Right.
Now you'd have to train it. Another trend that's going on, there's a growing universe of dissatisfied teachers.
Yes.
Could teachers make very good team members, dental team members? I'm going to say yes, yes, yes. Very good team members. There's jobs are being lost in retail, in traditional brick and mortar retail. People that used to get jobs in stores and in retail and banks. A lot of banks are doing all of their banking virtually. So could someone that used to work in retail or used to work in the banking profession, could they make a good dental team member? Yeah. So I'm going to tell you, doctor, don't relax your standards on it. It's more important than ever because it allows you to differentiate yourself and allows you to truly function as a high performance team. So don't lower those standards for sure. But I appreciate the question. It's a great question. And I'm going to say my experience is if you do the cross-training right, it actually creates a more engaged team member, a more happier team member, a more fulfilled team member.
Thank you, Gary. Let me ask you the second question. Can you share some examples of admin team members who are being cross-trained so they can work clinically?
Well, in the coaching action segment, I use the example of Madi, my daughter, who's an admin team member. I mean, she was my office manager in my coaching firm for many, many years. But we cross-trained her on being a new patient coordinator. The reason why we wanted Carly and Madi to be our new patient coordinators is they've got strong people skills. And you want someone in that role that has strong people skills. But another example would be to do some in-service training with an admin team member to be able to jump in and assist. And I don't mean assisting on a complex procedure. I'm not talking about that. But I'm talking about just to be an extra set of hands, in an appointment and be able to do some rudimentary assisting. To be able to handle sterilization of instruments. And again, it has to be done to the same standard of care that would be required. We don't want to compromise that. Another thing, be able to work with the hygienist, charting existing conditions for the initial perio exam, to be charting that information. All those are things that an admin team member can do in the back for sure. And even if they don't have any prior experience, in the back, they can be trained to do those. And you can do that through in-service training during your regular team meetings.
Gary, I have a third question for you. I understand your core business is coaching. And as part of that, I heard you help clients with team training. I'm curious about what type of team training activities that might fall under cross training. So, for example, I have a person in the front, and I just want this person to be more versatile.
Great question. And yes, Doctor, you're accurate. We do in our coaching, we do a lot of this work, and we do it virtually. We do it via Zoom. For example, one of those exercises, we teach everyone how to take the digital photos for patient education. Everyone, and even team members that have, like, quite literally, other than their phone, they've never touched a camera in their life. I think everyone has experience taking photos with our phones, right?
Yes.
But even if they've never, used, we have a simple dental point and shoot camera that takes amazing photos, and we go through training with that. We do that. We do it online with their offices, and it's really fun to see team members that didn't think they had any aptitude towards photography actually take really good photos. Another example that we do is, and we do this with our admin as well as our assistants, is we do cross training on answering the phones, Because remember, we have a standard on that, Aaron. It's not just answer the phones, but they have to answer the phone if it's a potential new patient and have the same conversion rate that my Rockstar team members have, which is 70% or more. And so we do cross training there as well. And that's been a wonderful versatility for the practice. One of the things that happens in a lot of practice, and you know this, you know it better than I do because you have the data. And doctor, if you don't know this KPI that I'm about to share with you, you need to know it. What % of your calls during business hours go to voicemail? What % of your calls? Aaron, what have we found out by data on this?
Yeah, I think we grade an A as less than 5% of the calls should go to voicemail, but we have seen
5 or less.
5 or less, and we have seen
during business hours, correct?
Correct, during business hours, because of course, if somebody's calling you at 3 a.m, nobody's expecting you to answer the phone, or even on a weekend, or even after 6. Right. But during business hours, typically defined as 9 to 5, you need to answer the phone, and there are some practices that are missing 45% of their calls during business hours, 35%, even 50% of their calls. So it's just like, imagine, you have your front door shut and have your patients are coming to the door, knocking, nobody's there and leaving. Because today people don't leave voicemail, especially those new patients.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll amplify that, Aaron. Recently with a very specific client, we discovered that they were missing 42% of their calls during business. And that was run over a 6-month period of time. So it wasn't just a fluke month where they might've been shorthanded or something. But when I asked the doctor, how do you think you're doing when it comes to answering calls, inbound calls? He goes, I think we're doing great. We got enough phone lines. I've got enough people. I think we're doing great. Well, he was missing 42% of them. And, that would be an example of your marketing doing its job. What's marketing's job, Aaron?
Make the phone ring.
Make the phone ring from a potential new patient. Make it ring. So the phone was ringing, but they were missing 42% of them. And you're absolutely right, Aaron, that if they found you via a Google search, their impatient is profound. They will likely just hang up and go to the next office.
Absolutely.
So that might make the difference. Just closing that gap from 42% to 5 might provide you with the right number of new patients every month without having to spend another nickel on marketing.
Absolutely.
An example of that. So yes, we do a lot of training. For example, it's also a team sport to successfully resign from PPO plans.
Yes.
Darren, how do you think it would go if there was only one person, say our insurance coordinator? If the insurance coordinator was the only person that could talk to patients about the changes they're making with regard to their status with the PPO plan, how do you think that would go?
It would be a disaster, right? I mean, I know some of the practices you help reduce insurance dependence, they have 70%, 80% depends on PPO plans. So imagine if one person has to carry that load, it's just not going to work.
It's not going to work. And first of all, you're going to miss having that conversation with many people,
Yes.
just because it's, you might have 30 patients on a given day you've got to talk to.
Exactly.
And if that's falling on one person's lap, that's not even realistic. So that's an area where we cross-train everyone in the office. And we also do training around personality types. We know how to talk to patients that are D's and I's. They don't have many questions, but they have a few. S's and C's have a lot more questions. We learn how to identify the right person to talk with every patient. That's another area where massive cross-training makes that whole exercise run so much more smoothly and so much more effectively, and allows us to keep more of our existing patients, which is one of the ways we measure success when we're resigning from PPO plans. And we're seeing great results, because it ends up being a balanced effort, instead of it all, falling in one or two people. And it allows us to get a much better result.
Thank you, Gary. Let me ask you the fourth and the last question. I remember listening to a Thriving Dentist Show episode where you introduced the concept of champions in a practice. Please share some more about this concept. Like, how can I apply it in my practice?
Yeah, the concept of champion is something that I developed in my coaching work. And let me tell you why. You all probably know we have 24 systems for a thriving practice. If you're new to the Thriving Dentist Show, Darren, let's put the links to the 2 different episodes we did on the 24 systems. We did 24 Systems of Thriving Practice Part 1 and 24 Systems of Thriving Practice Part 2. We'll put a link in the show notes. To go to the show notes, just go to thrivingdentist.com, click on podcast, scroll down to today's episode. By the way, that's the episode where you could watch Dr. Dennis Hartlieb's video that he shared with you. But that's also where you can find the links to those 2 episodes all about systems. And the reason we did 2 of them is because we couldn't cover all 24 systems in a single episode. So we broke it down into 2. So part 1 is systems 1 through 12. And part 2 was systems 13 through 24. So in our 24 systems work that we do, I discovered as I was introducing those to clients that very often a system would get installed in the practice, and then shortly afterwards, the system would start to degrade, would start to evaporate. It was not anyone's fault. In fact, I would call it a function of human nature. Because meanwhile, lots of other moving pieces in the practice, and all of a sudden now, last month we were focusing on a system to collect more Google reviews, for example. That's one of the 24 systems, and now all of a sudden we're working on growing the Invisalign component of our practice, and it's kind of natural for that Google review project to kind of like accidentally just evaporate. So because I didn't want that to evaporate, the systems have to have stickiness. They have to stick in your practice. I came up with the idea of creating a systems champion. Now, nobody wants another job in the practice.
Correct.
But everyone wants to be a champion.
Absolutely.
So we give them the title of champion. We give them our Google reviews champion. And it's that person isn't necessarily the one that goes out and gets all the reviews. No, but that person's responsibility is to keep Google reviews front and center in the practice. So here's some things that person could do. That person could read Google reviews in the morning huddles, especially if the reviews call out individuals in your practice. Maybe someone sang the praises of Heidi, or maybe someone sang the praises of Madi. Then the Google review champion can read that. Hey, we got this one yesterday. Let me read it to you. And they read it out. Another thing they could do is be the cheerleader when the office is on a good roll. Hey guys, we got 4 new Google reviews yesterday. Let's keep it going today. Let's see if we can get another 4 today. But they can also be the polite correction there. Say, wait a minute, guys, it's been a week and a half since we've gotten a Google review. Let's get back on the horse. So that person becomes the champion. And by doing that, we're creating a level of accountability that wasn't there before. And we're also creating better results in the practice because these systems are now sticking. But that's the concept of a systems champion. And what we found when we introduced those, and I teach my clients to do this, typically we have 24 systems. Now, just as a disclaimer, not all 24 systems require a champion. For example, one of the systems is for the doctor to always have their 3-year calendar of major CE that they're taking. So who's the systems champion of that one, Naren?
The doctor, right?
That would be the doctor. Yeah. So not all 24 require, but about 14 of the 24 could benefit by a champion. And so what I teach my clients to do is we introduce the system and then ask, hey, who would like to volunteer to be the champion for this? And we try to divide it out equally. If you have a smaller practice, a team member might be responsible for a couple of systems. If you have a larger practice, it might be just a single one. And we always tell the team that if we don't get any volunteers, then we're going to pick someone. So if it's something you like, raise your hand and volunteer for it, because that way you'll get what you want. That's the concept in a nutshell of the systems champion. Did I explain that, Naren, in a way that makes sense?
Absolutely, Gary. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah,
and
that allows
the only other point. Yeah, the only other point I would add is, I mean, all of those things, cross-training, champions, and even like focusing on key parts of your, key pillars of your business. It's all about like making sure that things that are important are taken care of, right? So, so I do believe like today's episode, Gary, is a really wonderful episode that, hopefully people take to heart and make it.
It's about building a thriving team.
Yes.
Another area, I just thought of this, when we do book club with our team, that is in a way cross-training, because everyone in the team is being exposed to that knowledge, that information, that those concepts, and it's keeping their minds engaged. One of the coolest things that I've had experience with book club. So book club is we pick a book, we read it together as a team, we read or listen to it. People can listen to it, and then we come together for meetings and we talk about what we learned. And then we talk about how we can apply this in the practice. But one of the most rewarding experiences I had was after introducing this to an office, the office manager told me, Gary, I used to be a voracious reader. And then I don't know what happened, but she said, I'm embarrassed to tell you this. Before you started book club, I hadn't read a book in 20 years. And she said, we had 3 kids in rapid succession. So I was a young working mom. Sadly, that marriage ended up in a divorce, and I was a single parent for a while. And man, it was all I could do to keep my head above water, and I didn't have time to read. And she said, now my life has come full circle. I'm remarried. We have a great relationship. Our kids are getting older, and you've reintroduced me to reading, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. So reading is a form of cross-training in an abstract way, for sure. Yes. Well, hey, as we come to a finish line today, I hope you apply the information that I shared in today's episode. Cross-training team members in a thriving practice. I believe cross-training and thriving go hand in hand. Absolutely go hand in hand. Hey, as we wrap up today, Naren, I want to thank you for co-hosting this episode with me, co-hosting the podcast. I also want to thank all the wonderful work that you do with your Equa team to help dentists attract the number of new patients they need every month and the quality of new patients. If any of you would like to learn how to massively upgrade your marketing, and by the way, spend less than you're currently spending, I would encourage you to schedule a marketing strategy meeting with Equa. You can go to www.equa.com/MSM. Learn how Equa can help you attract the right number and right quality of new patients every month at likely a fraction of what you're currently spending. It'd be time well spent for sure. On that note, one reminder, I have a request to make. If you haven't already hit subscribe to the Thriving Dentist Show on your podcast directory, wherever you listen to podcasts, hit subscribe. It's free. That means every Wednesday when we upload a new episode, it'll be uploaded for your listening convenience. It'll be there on your listening device. Hit subscribe, and you'll never miss a future episode of the Thriving Dentist Show. On that note, let me simply say thank you for the privilege of your time. Naren and I look forward to connecting with you on the next Thriving Dentist Show.